Despite the two, this is actually the first Valis game to grace PC Engine, and it shows. It's Valis II, released in 1989 for PC Engine from Telnet and Lasersoft, one of two sequels to the original Valis game that graced Japanese home computers, which got its own Valis II sequel that is completely different from today's subject matter, but regardless, both tell the same story in that a new enemy called Megas is threatening the realms and it's up to schoolgirl Yuko to take up arms once again. Again, we're playing this off the Valis collection, which only has the Japanese versions and not the English dubs that graced overseas, which is a shame because I would have liked to have sampled some of those amateurish performances. Oh well. So Valis II being the first game in the series to grace PC Engine, it's a long story, no need to be chronologically confused over this stuff, is naturally fairly rudimentary for an action game but still has the basics down. You control Yuko and her Valis sword thing through 6 acts, killing bad guys and collecting power-ups from health recovery items to varied projectile attacks for your sword. You could run, jump, and attack. You've got some decent mid-air control. Valis II is where they decided that your sword should always shoot something, so right off the bat, you have a projectile attack, which is your only means of attack, as your sword has no real hitbox. Now you can collect different types of attacks, homing shots, double shots, that sort of thing, and you could also subsequently power up that attack with item drops. You also have various sub-weapons with limited uses that can be executed by pressing up and jump, which includes screen nukes, time stops, temporary shields, and invulnerability. A lot of Valis II is moving in one direction and constantly spamming the fire button while attempting to anticipate rushing enemies that will come out of nowhere from the sides, giving you little room to react unless you have the levels memorized, and even that tends to be of little help. Sometimes you'll go up to higher ground and move in the other direction, other times you'll drop down and do the same. And every so often the screen will stop and some random enemy will emerge very slowly on screen that you'll have to excise in order to move onwards. Whenever you die, you respawn at a checkpoint but retain your equipment until you eventually lose all your lives and get a game over. The exception is during boss battles where you can die and respawn on the spot, thus eliminating any worry of restarting a boss fight anew, which of course reduces these boss battles to whomever can outlast the other without much effort, and let me tell you, the action stages tend to be more difficult than the boss battles, and also it's fairly easy to accumulate a bunch of lives, especially in the early going. On the surface, Valis II is not a very inspired game. The core gameplay is fairly shallow, the level design and enemy placement tends to be lackluster, and there are some cheap hits to be suffered if you decide to rush through things aimlessly. However, control is generally responsive and easy to figure out with no real issues other than pressing up and jump to summon your sub-weapon things. That's a bit off-putting at times, but I can forgive the other quibbles because despite the two, this is technically the first Valis on PC Engine, so they haven't quite figured things out yet. Also, this is infinitely more playable than the original Valis computer game, and even just a touch better than the Valis II that appeared on MSX. Although to be fair, Valis II on MSX is actually borderline playable, and there's even a couple bits like equipable weapons and costumes that would have been nice to have in the CD version. Oh well. Graphically, it's not a bad looking game. The cutscenes are fairly basic and some have limited animation, but it's enough to get the story across. The in-game elements aren't too bad looking, character sprites are somewhat smallish, but the larger boss monsters are somewhat fearsome looking. Part of me wishes you were fighting in more interesting locales though. The cityscape ain't too shabby, but once you get to the Vicanti dream world things, the scenery doesn't look too dreamy. Still, not a bad looking game for whatever it's worth, which probably isn't much. Valis II has some decent voice acting on the Japanese side of things. Again, these collections don't have the English dubs, but given when this was released, say cheese is all I will assume. Other than that, you have some mild sound effects and some CD quality synth-sounding soundtrack that's an acquired taste. The tracks are okay, but not the best lineup of tracks. Not my favorite, honestly. The computer Valis II had better tracks that I wish were converted on here, but whatever. Your mileage may vary. Overall, the best you could say about Valis II on PC Engine is that it is a perfectly acceptable side-scrolling action platform game that does what it does well enough, with room for improvement in a couple places. and that would make it the most playable Valis up to this point. So much so that when it came time to crafting the third chapter in the Valis trilogy, they didn't bother with the computer side of things, they just refined the game they had on PC Engine, and that resulted in... well, we'll get to that one next time. In any event, Valis 2 is okay-ish at best, but nothing really special. Worth a sample on the collection if you have that, or if you just want to follow the story, such as it is, but otherwise this is pretty much skippable fare.